Some things look like small gestures and turn out to be the ground beneath your feet. A heavy iron skillet carried across a frosty meadow on a Thursday morning. The creak of an oak porch board under a heavy boot. A man who had long forgotten how to expect anything good from the world, and a woman who had spent 2 years showing up without keeping score. Nora Vance was 26 years old, and she moved to the Wyoming timber country with the calm, unhurried certainty of someone who knew exactly what her hands were built for. Since her father's passing 4 years ago, she had run the Vance timber trade and regional supply contracts single-handedly. She fixed her own wagons, negotiated her own lumber prices in the town of Blackwood, and held her ground against men twice her age who assumed a young woman alone in the territory was an invitation to take advantage. Nora didn't need saving, and she made sure the territory knew it. Every Thursday, her supply route took her past the isolated timberline cabin of Silas Thorne. Silas was 52, a former territorial deputy. He carried the kind of quiet that life only gives to a man who has seen too much blood and buried too many promises. A brutal ambush a decade prior had left him with a faded scar along his jawline and a deep, permanent solitude. The folks in Blackwood treated Silas like a respectable relic, a man whose brave days were far behind him, content to spend his remaining years breeding foundation quarter horses in the High Valley. But Nora saw Silas differently. She saw the way his eyes registered every shadow along the ridge, the deliberate way he placed his hands on the fence rail, and the absolute weight of a word once he gave it. On a crisp October morning in 1878, the first frost clung to the pine needles as Nora pulled her wagon up to Silas's porch. In her hands, wrapped in a clean flour sack, was a heavy iron skillet of freshly baked skillet bread, warm against the biting mountain air. Silas stepped out onto the porch, a cup of black coffee in his hand. He looked at the wrapped skillet, then up at her face. The weather-worn lines around his eyes softened, and he offered a rare, slow smile, the kind that changed his entire face and made him look, just for a second, like a younger man. "If I were 15 years younger, Nora," Silas said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp carrying a light touch of humor, "I might start thinking a man could get used to this kind of treating." Nora didn't blink. She stood on the top step, looking at him with an expression he had never seen on any woman's face, direct, steady, and entirely unafraid. 15 years wouldn't change a thing, Silas," Nora said quietly. "You're either the man who notices who brings the bread, or you aren't." She set the skillet down on the porch bench, turned on her heel without waiting for him to parse the way of her words, and walked back to her wagon. Silas stood on the porch in total silence, the warm skillet at his side, watching her wagon disappear into the golden autumn pines. He stood there for a very long time before he finally took a breath and went back inside. Small frontier towns like Blackwood had opinions about everything, especially about young, capable women who ran businesses without a husband. And in the autumn of 1878, the town's favorite opinion belonged to Julian Mercer. Mercer was 30 years old, handsome in the immaculate, tailored way of men who had never hauled a log or mended a wire fence in their lives. The son of a wealthy Cheyenne investor, Mercer had arrived in Blackwood with polished leather boots, a pocket watch that chimed on the hour, and the full backing of the town council. He represented the railroad right-of-way, the promise that Blackwood was going to become a bustling hub of commerce and modern progress. He had also made his intentions regarding Nora Vance clear to everyone in the territory. Mercer didn't court aggressively. He was too smooth for that. He sent expensive arrangements from Denver, appeared at the dry goods store whenever her wagon was parked outside, and spoke of the future with the easy confidence of a man who believed every door opened if you spent enough money on the key. The town approved of Mercer enthusiastically. Martha Higgins at the general store told Nora outright while weighing out sugar, "Julian Mercer is a gentleman with a fortune attached to his name. Nora, a woman can only haul timber for so long before the winters break her down. You'd be a fool not to let a man like that take the reins." Nora had smiled politely, taken her flour, and said nothing. Her silence wasn't hesitation. It was certainty. She knew exactly what Julian Mercer saw. When he looked at her, he saw a lovely piece of property that came with a prime 40-acre timber parcel right in the middle of his proposed rail line. When Mercer sat across from her at the local diner, offering to take her to the upcoming Founders Day social, he talked about dividends, expansion, and security. But when Nora closed her eyes, she didn't think of Mercer's Denver gifts. She thought of a flash flood the previous spring that had torn out her creek bridge, leaving her timber wagon stranded. Julian Mercer had sent a polite note expressing his sympathy. Silas Thorne had shown up at daylight with a team of draft horses and heavy oak beams, working 3 straight days in the freezing mud until the crossing was solid again. Silas hadn't asked for pay, he hadn't mentioned it in town, and he had never brought it up since. To Nora, Mercer was a man who bought solutions to make an impression. Silas was a man who built them because it was the right thing to do. When Nora gave Mercer a firm, quiet refusal regarding his invitation to the social, the speculator's polished charm began to show its cracks. Within 3 days, Mercer stopped sending flowers. Instead, he paid a visit to the county clerk's office, digging through old territorial land grants until he found an obscure, forgotten tax assessment on the Vance timber lot, a debt from her late father's estate that had quietly accrued interest. By Friday afternoon, Nora received an official notice from the sheriff. Unless $300 in gold was paid to the land office within 2 weeks, her 40-acre timber lot would be put up for public auction on the stage at the Founders Day social. Mercer had engineered the perfect trap. It was an impossible sum for Nora to raise on such short notice without selling her timber at a loss, and Mercer intended to buy her land out from under her for pennies on the dollar, or force her to accept his hand in marriage to clear the debt. For 2 weeks, the High Valley was filled with a bitter chill of impending winter, and for 2 weeks, Silas Thorne turned the situation over in his mind while working his timber line. Silas was not a man who moved hastily. He turned problems over the way a farmer turns hard soil, looking at every stone underneath before deciding where to lay the fence. He spent long evenings in his quiet cabin, staring into the small mirror hanging by the kitchen door. He looked at the silver gray framing his temples, the deep lines carved around his eyes by 52 years of high-altitude sun and hard living. He told himself he was being realistic. He told himself that a 26-year-old woman with her whole life ahead of her had no business tying her future to a scarred former deputy who spent his days talking to his horses. He told himself Julian Mercer could give her a life without lifting heavy iron or worrying about frozen timber roads. Then Silas thought about Eleanor, his late wife who had passed a decade ago, and the quiet words she had told him on her deathbed. Silas, stubbornness in the wrong direction isn't strength. It's just cowardice wearing a heavy coat. He thought about Nora carrying that warm skillet across the frost. He thought about the direct, fierce honesty in her eyes when she told him 15 years wouldn't change a thing. On the 10th day, Silas walked out to his pasture. Grazing in the autumn grass were 10 head of prime foundation quarter horses, the finest bloodlines in territory, representing 5 patient years of breeding, sweat, and long winter nights in the barn. They were his financial security. They were his legacy. Without saying a word to a soul in Blackwood, Silas halted the horses, led them down the mountain trail to the livestock buyer in Laramie, and sold the entire herd for cold, hard gold. 2 days before the auction, Nora was repairing a split-rail fence along the boundary line, dividing their properties, when she heard boots crunching through the pine needles. She turned to find Silas standing at the fence rail. "You sold your horses, Silas," Nora said softly, her voice tight with emotion she fought to control. News traveled fast in the territory, and she had heard what happened in Laramie that morning. That herd was your whole future. You had no right to do that for my land. Silas placed his weathered, callous hands on the top fence rail and looked at her. His gaze was steady, clear, and completely devoid of doubt. "A herd of horses is just stock, Nora," Silas said, his low voice cutting to the wind in the pine branches. "A life spent watching the right person walk away because you were too proud or too arithmetic about your age to step forward. That's a debt a man can't ever pay off." He looked across the fence rail, stepping closer to the neutral boundary. "I'm 52 years old, Nora. I've got scars, a quiet house, and a lot of winter behind me. But I'd rather stand on a porch with you in the freezing rain than own every horse in Wyoming." Nora set her fencing tools down in the grass. She walked up to the fence, looking into his eyes with the same quiet strength she had carried on his porch weeks ago. "I stopped counting your years the morning you rebuilt my bridge, Silas," she said softly. "I was just waiting for you to stop counting them, too." The Blackwood Town Hall was packed to the rafters for the annual Founders' Day social. Lantern light reflected off polished brass and dark spruce timbers, but despite the tables laden with roast venison and cider, an undercurrent of sharp anticipation filled the air. Everyone knew what was coming. Julian Mercer stood near the front stage, looking crisp and immaculate in a tailored dark suit. He moved through the crowd with easy charm, nodding to town council members and buying drinks for the local merchants. On the mahogany table beside the stage lay the official county auction papers, the mechanism designed to strip Nora Vance of her 40-acre timber lot and force her into financial submission. When Nora walked into the hall, the quiet conversations lulled. She wore a simple, deep green dress, the color of the mountain pines in late autumn. She didn't look like a defeated woman coming to watch her livelihood auction away. She carried herself with the calm grace of someone who already knew how the story ended. At precisely 8 o'clock, Julian Mercer stepped onto the wooden stage. He cleared his throat, holding up the county tax ledger for the room to see. "Friends and neighbors of Blackwood," Mercer began, his voice ringing smooth and confident across the hall. "As representative of the Wyoming territorial rail line, it falls to me to settle outstanding territorial tax assessments for the betterment of our growing town. Tonight, 40 acres of prime timberland currently held under the Vance estate are subject to public auction to clear an unpaid debt of $300 in gold." Mercer paused, casting a polished, sympathetic look toward Nora. "Given the unfortunate circumstances, the rail company is prepared to open the bidding at $300, Mercer continued, leaning slightly over the podium. "We offer this not only to ensure our town gets its railroad, but to relieve Miss Vance of a burden no young woman should have to carry alone." A few townspeople nodded in agreement, convinced Mercer was playing the generous protector. Mercer smiled, raising his gavel. "Do I hear 300? The heavy oak doors at the back of the hall swung open. The draft from the cold Wyoming night blew through the doorway, flickering the lantern flames. Standing in the entrance was Silas Thorne. He wore his clean leather vest and good wool jacket, his gray hair neatly combed back, his dark eyes fixed entirely on the stage. The hall fell completely silent. The sound of Silas's boots on the wooden floorboards echoed through the room as he walked steadily down the center aisle, bypassing the town council, ignoring the staring glances, until he stood directly at the foot of the stage. Silas didn't reach for a gun. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't offer a single word of anger. Instead, Silas reached into his coat, pulled out a folded piece of heavy parchment bearing the official wax seal of the territorial capital, and laid it flat on the mahogany table right next to Mercer's gavel. "The debt is cleared, Mercer," Silas said, his low voice carrying into every corner of the room. Mercer's smile faltered. He picked up the paper, his hands narrowing as his eyes scanned the text. This is a territorial redemption receipt, signed by the governor's land officer in Laramie yesterday morning. Silas stated calmly, $300 in gold, paid in full. The Vance timber lot carries no debt, no lien, and no tax obligation to the county or your rail company. Mercer's face turned pale. "You sold your quarter horses," he whispered, the slick composure finally shattering into genuine shock. "You liquidated your entire ranch for a tax note." Silas met his gaze without flinching. "I paid what was owed to protect what matters. The land stays with Nora." A murmur rippled through the crowd, turning into low murmurs of respect. Martha Higgins looked from Silas to Nora, her previous gossip forgotten in the face of an act so absolute and selfless that no one in the room could dispute it. Mercer looked around the hall, realizing in a single second that his leverage, his public standing, and his scheme had dissolved completely. He slowly set down the gavel, folded his papers, and stepped down from the stage without another word. Nora stepped through the crowd, stopping right in front of Silas. Silas looked down at her, the old self-doubt threatening to creep back into his eyes for just a second. "Did I do all right, Nora?" he asked quietly. Nora reached out, taking his rough, calloused hand in hers right in front of the entire town. "You did exactly what a man who notices is supposed to do, Silas." By late winter of 1879, the gossip in Blackwood had settled into something soft and warm. Julian Mercer had quietly packed his ledgers and returned to Cheyenne, unable to face the town he had tried to manipulate. In February, as the heavy mountain snow began to give way to the first green shoots in the valley, Silas Thorne and Nora Vance were married in a small wooden chapel at the edge of town. There were no grand displays or extravagant receptions. Just two people who knew the value of hard work, clear words, and silent devotion, taking vows before their neighbors. Nora moved her things to the Thorne homestead, bringing her mother's iron skillet, her accounting ledgers, and a sharp business mind that doubled the ranch's timber profits within the first season. Silas rebuilt his timber fences, expanded the barn, and worked the land not as a man waiting for his life to end, but as a man whose life had just begun. They shared the work not by custom, but by heart. On mornings when the timber trail was icy, Silas drove the wagon. On afternoons when the accounts needed settling, Nora handled the books. And every Thursday morning, without fail, a fresh pan of skillet bread sat on the wooden bench on the porch. 2 years later, in the golden autumn of 1880, the Wyoming mountains did what they always did. Turned the aspens to bright gold under skies so blue it looked painted. Silas stood on the front porch of the cabin, looking out over the valley. He was 54 now, but the gray at his temples no longer looked like a burden. It looked like wisdom earned. In his arms, wrapped in a soft wool blanket, he held their 8-month-old daughter, Clara, a bright-eyed child with her mother's fierce, direct gaze and her father's quiet patience. Nora stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, leaning her shoulder against Silas's arm as they watched the morning sun hit the peaks. Silas looked down at his daughter, then turned his eyes to his wife. A gentle, slow smile spread across his face, the one that smoothed away every line and every scar. "If I were 15 years younger, Nora," Silas murmured softly, his voice full of a warmth that filled the mountain morning, "I might have been smart enough to find you sooner." Nora smiled, reaching up to gently lay her hand on their baby's blanket. 15 years wouldn't have changed a thing, Silas Thorne," she whispered, looking out over the land that was entirely theirs. "You'd still be 15 years late to what was already ours." Silas held his wife and daughter close as a mountain breeze rustled through the pines, grateful past all arithmetic, past all the counting of years, that he had stopped measuring his age long enough to answer the door. Silas Thorne almost let the arithmetic of age talk him out of the best thing in his life, but he proved that true character and quiet loyalty will always outshine young promises. If this story brought a little warmth to your day, please hit the like button, subscribe to Sarah's Wild West Chronicles, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Drop a comment below letting us know where in the world you are watching from today. We read every single one. Until next time, keep writing your own story.